You're listening to the Elvis Ultimate Fan Channel podcast, the channel that is devoted 100% to the life and career of the biggest-selling recording artist of all time, with your host, Steve Francis.
Mike Stone is an American martial artist, retired karate fighter, fight choreographer, stuntman, actor, author, and motivational speaker. He is well known for his karate tournament successes in the 1960s. He's authored several books, most notably Mike Stone's book on American eclectic karate. Mike was also a former boyfriend of Priscilla Presley. I'm delighted to say I have Mike on the line to speak with me today. Hi Mike, and thanks for joining me on the show today.
Welcome Steve, it's nice to be here.
And I understand that you're in the beautiful Philippines, so it's probably another great day in paradise, is it?
Yes it is, it's beautiful every day.
And what have you done with yourself today? Do you mind me asking?
Not at all. I about 3 weeks ago, I guess, I started writing my autobiography seriously. I've been writing for maybe 25, 30 years or so, just little stories and experiences and situations I've been in. So, but about 3 weeks ago, I started really to write seriously. By seriously, I mean spending sometimes 5 to 7 hours a day writing. So
that must be very grueling. I mean, you know, it sounds sort of 5 or 6 hours, but I'm sure when you're actually sat at the computer and tapping away for 6 or 7 hours, it can be very, very grueling.
Yeah, it can be, but the thing I like about it is having to reflect on your past. The time really flies by when you start thinking about it and then actually putting it into words. So it's because you bring up a lot of emotions that you had when you recall different situations that happened in your life. So
yeah, it must be very cathartic.
Oh, it is very much. Great therapy. Yeah, that's correct. That's where I first met Bruce Lee. Yeah.
Oh, you met Bruce Lee?
Yeah, Bruce Lee was invited by Ed Parker, one of Elvis's instructors. And Ed Parker was the promoter of that particular event. And he's also a fellow Hawaiian. And when we had gone to that event and I had won that particular event.
So tell us then about your first meeting with Elvis and Priscilla.
First meeting, they had come, again, Ed Parker had sponsored an event called the Mainland versus the U.S., what was it? The Mainland versus Hawaii Team Championships in Hawaii at the Convention Center. And Elvis and Priscilla were vacationing in Hawaii at that time. And Elvis was invited by Ed Parker, and they came to the event. And they watched it until one of the last fights of the evening, and then they get up to leave because obviously they would have caused a tremendous amount of commotion if they had stayed until after the event. But I never met them then. I bodyguarded a guy named Phil Spector, who was a record producer, and Phil was invited by RCA to go to Elvis's concert at the Hilton Hotel in Las Vegas. And Phil took me with him, with his wife also, Veronica from the Ronettes. And we had gone to watch Elvis's show, and we sat at the table with several of the executives from RCA. And they had wanted, along with Elvis, had wanted Phil to watch Elvis's show with the idea that he might possibly do the next single recording for Elvis to produce his record. And after the show, we had gone back to talk with Elvis, and Priscilla was there, and that's the first time we had met. It was, it only maybe took 3 or 4 seconds, and that was it.
What was your first impression of Elvis?
Well, first of all, I was always a fan.
Yeah.
That sounds strange, but yes, of course, I knew who he was, and there was a thing when television was quite new in the mid 50s or so, especially at our home, and I had seen Elvis later on, and I had seen a guy named Johnny Mathis.
Oh yes.
And another guy named Engelbert Humperdinck. And during the course of the time I was going through school and everything, I had seen those 3 stars sing on our TV set. And every time they did a close-up to each one of these gentlemen, I looked at the screen close up, looked into their eyes, and I said to myself, someday I'm going to meet them. Now, not all at the same time, but individually when I saw them, this is the feeling I had that I will meet them someday.
And obviously, you saw Elvis. You said you saw Elvis in concert. What was the concert like?
Well, it was very good. I mean, he's just awesome. I mean, what terrific energy, charisma. He's such a handsome man. Mm-hmm. Great voice. I mean, there was nothing not to like about him. He was just, and when you're in the presence of someone like that, that is so good at what they do, it's very humbling, for sure. Yeah.
So the next thing is Elvis suggested that Priscilla train with you?
No, that's also not true. There's really quite a few things that I've read over the years that are just absolutely not correct.
Well,
not true.
This is great because I really want to hear it from the horse's mouth.
No, there were many things that maybe I can talk about this evening that might set it straight. As you probably am aware, I have never really given interviews at all.
Yeah, well, I would really welcome, the opportunity for you to give your side of the story. I really would.
Well, the reason I'm willing to say it, and especially to you for being the first to come out, and at a time in my life, like I said, where I'm doing the autobiography, I'm venting all of my feelings and ideas, and I'm being exceptionally truthful, even about how I've been growing up and everything. I mean, I'm not even pulling punches on me. Believe me, there's nothing glamorous or fantastic about me talking about myself.
Okay.
So when it came to the idea about Priscilla taking karate, what had really happened was this. She was taken from Ed Parker, and Ed Parker was also taken from Elvis. This is in Beverly Hills at their home there. And Ed Parker wanted her to go and see some local karate events, smaller events, not the big ones like he was throwing. And several of Ed Parker's black belts in Orange County, where I lived, were actually holding different events, very small localized events. So what had happened was she no longer wanted to train with Ed Parker because Ed Parker was really only interested in training Elvis.
Okay.
And she sensed that. And the fact that she was a woman, which doesn't make her any less of a martial artist. But Ed Parker was used to, at this particular time in his life, working with some of the very best physical athletes. And I think he didn't appreciate having to spend so much time starting with somebody that was really just starting off as she was at that time. So she sensed it and wanted to train with someone other than Ed Parker. So the fact that she lived up in Beverly Hills, it was recommended, and again, I don't know who, so I'm not going to say, but possibly to train with Chuck Norris because he had a school in Sherman Oaks, California on Ventura Boulevard. Now, Chuck and I were very good friends for many, many years. We vacationed together, we trained together, we did events together, we did everything together. And I used to visit his school up there quite a bit. So we had met Priscilla just briefly when she had taken a class with Chuck up at the Sherman Oaks School. And then she had asked me, because of course she's very well known, and after the last session of the evening, when people are changing and going home and everything, she stayed behind a little bit. I think she had a friend named Joanne Esposito.
Yes.
Joni Esposito.
Yes.
So Joni and a girl named Nora, I think from Memphis, but they had accompanied Priscilla to the class. So they waited for her, and then we were talking, and since I was a good friend of Chuck, obviously I stayed behind to talk with Chuck. And we had just briefly mentioned, and she had asked me if I have a school. And I said, yes, I do. And she says, oh, where is it? I said, it's in Orange County, California. It's about 50 to 60 miles away from here. It's really quite far. And she goes, oh, it might be interesting for me to come down and watch one of your classes. And I said, no, I don't think so, because it's really quite far. And it would be not fair for me to say, oh, yeah, sure, come down and watch the class, because I knew that the reason she had gone to Chuck was for convenience. Mm-hmm. So for me to even consider that she would drive all the way to Orange County to take classes from me was just like, you know how they talk in Hollywood, right? They say a lot of things. Yeah, let's meet for lunch and let's do this and let's that. And I believe that's, I mean, she was being nice and gracious, but I believe that's the kind of chatter that it was. And I'm really a no-nonsense guy. I don't know if you've ever heard about my reputation, but I cannot stand pettiness. I just don't like it.
Yeah.
I like people that shoot right from the hip. So I just said, I kind of discouraged her from even thinking about coming down to my class. And anyway, she said, well, can I just have your number if we decide sometime to come down with my friends? Because she admitted then that I have never driven on the freeway before alone.
Oh, wow.
So she's always had somebody to drive with her. So all the more reason I was thinking, like, well, she'll never come there, because who wants to come and train? You know, if she's going to train with me, it's going to be 2 or 3 days a week. So how would that be possible? So I kind of really discouraged her from that. But that was another time we had met. And then, shall I talk about the other couple of instances?
Yes, please. Yes, I'm sure all my listeners would be interested in this. Yes.
Well, there was another time, a guy named Bob Perry, who is a black belt from Ed Parker. He was also had a school not far from mine in Orange County, California. And they were holding a karate tournament there at a place called Balsa Chica High School. It's in Garden Grove Boulevard. Mm-hmm. So I had gone there that day and not expecting to see Priscilla there. So I went in and I just went directly up into the bleachers and sat to watch some of the matches from up there. And then Bob Perry and a guy named Bob White, who's a very good friend of mine till today, we're quite close, saw me sitting up in the bleachers and introduced me to the audience and asked for me to come down to the scorer's table, or the head table where the people were organizing the event. So I walked down there and I said hello to everybody. And there were a couple matches going on right in front of us. So at that time, the rings were not really boxing rings. They were gymnasium floors that were just taped with about a 2-inch white masking tape. So they taped off a 20-foot square, and that became the actually fighting area that the competitors fought in. So in front of me, Bob White was saying, oh, look at those two girls. And they were really beautiful. One was a blonde and the other was a brunette. Mm-hmm. And he said, that's Priscilla Presley. For some reason, I just took it that the blonde was Priscilla, and it was Joanne Esposito. So they were about maybe 5 or 6 feet in front of us watching the match, which was another 4 feet in front of them. And as the fighters fought and became aggressive in their direction, they actually fought out of the ring, which is very common. And in the process of doing that, the two girls backed up to get out of the way, and when they did, the brunette fell into my arms.
Oh.
I caught her, and that was Priscilla. But I didn't realize at the time that it was her. So I just stood her back up, and she said, oh, thank you. I said, you're welcome, and then just backed away. But I was looking at Joanne thinking that was Priscilla. So anyway, he said, oh, the one you caught, that's Priscilla. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, did you notice how pretty she was? I said, no, not really. I was looking at the other girl. So he said, but that's Priscilla. I said, oh, okay. And she had actually, I remember she had a short denim jacket top and a denim skirt with like patchwork, different color denim patches.
Uh-huh. This is very interesting, because this is actually a story I've never heard before.
Yes, you never heard it because nobody ever said it.
Okay, that's great. That's brilliant.
So anyway, when that finished, I walked back up into the bleachers where I was sitting before I came down. I didn't realize that she had. I found this out much later on a vacation that Priscilla and I went to Hawaii. And she said, remember the time we met at that little karate tournament in Orange County? And I threw myself into your arms. I said, what? She said, I knew you were standing behind me. And I just exaggerated trying to get out of the way of the two fighters. I knew you'd catch me. I said, are you serious? She said, yeah. So now when I think again in hindsight, after she had said this, I remember going back up into the bleachers to sit where I was sitting originally. And when I sat up there, and occasionally I would glance at the two girls again, and she would always be looking at me exactly where I was seated. And for her to know where I was seated, she must have had to follow me visually to see where I had gone to sit in the bleachers.
Mike, this is very fascinating, because this is something I'm learning something new here. I hadn't realized this is how it kind of all started, so to speak.
Well, let me tell you the one that really started it.
Okay.
It was Ed Parker's, I think it was 1960, maybe 67 or 68 International Karate Championships. I think Joe Louis was fighting Chuck Norris or somebody like that. Then it was a big platform elevated about a meter off the ground, a 40-foot square. And there was, on one side of it were referees, announcers, and people like that were involved in the production of the event. I was sitting along with a bunch of people. There was a row of us. Next to me was a guy named Alan Steen. Next to him was Joe Louis. Next to him was Chuck Norris. Next to him was Priscilla. Next to her was Nora. Next to Nora was Jerry Schilling. And next to Jerry Schilling was, who's that left-handed guitar player? Yeah, his name is Dick Dale.
Oh, right. Okay, Dick Dale.
Yeah, Dick Dale and the Deltones was his original group. But anyway, we're all seated on that one side. And again, there was a break in the match, and we were just all turning to each other laterally and talking. And then Alan Steen from Dallas, Texas, another martial arts champion, leaned forward, looked over at me and said, Mike, have you ever met Priscilla Presley? And I said, yeah, I think so. So he turns to Priscilla and said, Priscilla, I want you to meet Mike Stone. So she leans forward also to look in my direction, and I had to lean forward because everybody's sitting right in line. Mm-hmm. I leaned forward, and she did, and we looked at each other, and I said, hi, Priscilla. She says, hi, Mike Stone. And she called me Mike Stone. It's strange because in my life, even in grammar school and high school, very few girls ever called me Mike. They always called me Mike Stone. It's very weird. Even here in the Philippines, everybody calls me Mike Stone. It's as if Mike Stone is one name. Very strange. So Priscilla called me that, and then the evening was over, and everybody was milling around and talking and everything, but everybody was slowly leaving the arena floor. This is the Long Beach Arena. And I was talking now to Dick Dale and his wife. And at the time, he was married to a Filipino girl who was a Tahitian dancer at one of the Polynesian revues in Orange County, California. So we were talking, and we were talking about their lions, because he lived in Orange County, a place that he had a permit, because most people had lots over a quarter of an acre. And if you did, he had a permit allowed him to keep a couple lions on his property, female lions. So we were talking about the lions and everything, because he had pictures of the lions in his house jumping on his bed and everything. So we were talking about that. Then all of a sudden, Priscilla just walked in the middle of our conversation and just goes, hi, what are you guys talking about? And then Dick said, oh, we're just talking about the lions I have. She says, oh, yeah, that's fascinating, like that. And then, so she kept looking at me to say something, and I wouldn't, and then I would just keep talking to Dick. Then finally, Jerry Schilling came over with Joanne Esposito, yeah. and Jerry said, Scylla, we have to go now. It's getting late. We have to get back to the house. So she says, okay, I'm going. So they started to walk away, and then she was saying goodnight to Dick Dale. but she didn't say goodnight to me. So she just turned, and I said to her, I said, good night, nice to meet you. Now, this really must have been the third or fourth time we've met. And she walked away, and she walked all the way to the folding doors entrance to the arena, which was now about maybe 35, 40 yards away from where we were standing. And I was still talking with Dick and his wife. And she stopped, and she was now with Joanne and Jerry Schilling. And she stopped and turned, and there was still quite a few people in the arena. And she said, good night, Mr. Stone. So, and then she said, good night, Mr. Stone. I said, night, nice to meet you. And then when she left, I said to Dick, I said, man, she's a weird chick, huh?
Can we address the romance with Priscilla?
Yes.
Okay. All right. If you'd like to tell us about that, what happened afterwards, after this meeting, and she was saying goodbye, Mike Stone, and all that.
Well, how it actually got started was, again, she gave me a call. I think it was in the middle of the week. I'm thinking about Wednesday, because that's when I had one of my female instructors answer the phone for me, a girl named Katie Severs. And I was teaching a private lesson in the afternoon, and the phone rang, and Katie Severs answered the phone and then held the mouthpiece, leaned into the class, which she's not allowed to do, to interrupt the class, and said, Mr. Stone, Priscilla Presley is calling. And I said, who? She said, Priscilla Presley. I said, tell her to call back later. I'm not finished with my class. So she told Priscilla to call back later, because I'm in the middle of a class. So she called back later when, she said, call back in like 15 minutes, whatever it was. When she called back, this time I answered the phone. I said, hello. She said, hi. I said, hi. And it's almost like she said hi, expecting I should know who she was. So I said, yes, can I help you? She said, yes, Mike Stone? I said, yes. She said, hi, this is Priscilla. I said, hi, how can I help you? She says, oh, I'm sorry I interrupted your class, and sounded a little sarcastic, I said, no, it's a policy we have that when I'm in the middle of class, we don't, it can wait, regardless of who's calling. So she thought that she was so special that she could interrupt the class, I guess, I don't know. So I said, how can I help you? She says, well, I was thinking about coming down to watch one of your classes. And I said, all right. So she says, when do you have them? I said, Monday through Friday. Our last class is from 8 to 9:30. And she says, so I can come down and watch? I said, sure. And she said, oh, anybody can watch? I said, yes, anybody can watch. So I guess she thought I was making a special thing for her to watch the class. I said, no, we actually have a sitting area that is like a bleacher style. There's 3-step seats up that parents and friends of students can actually watch the class. I have nothing to hide in teaching. So she says, oh, okay, maybe I'll come down, and I have to bring a friend of mine. I said, all right, fine. So that was it. She says, okay, bye. So I said bye. And then a couple nights, I guess it was on the Friday night now, she came down with a girl named Nora that was from Memphis that was staying with her. And apparently Elvis was not in California at that time for her to leave, to go that far.
Uh-huh.
So Nora drove her down to Golden West Street in Huntington Beach. That's where my second school was. So she came and watched the class. And then after class, we have a normal, especially Friday night after class, we have a pizza night. So after we finished the class, everybody had left except for the instructors and myself, because I normally take the instructors out for pizza on Friday evenings at the end of the week. So she's just waiting around and, waiting for other people to leave, because I thought she wanted to ask me some questions. And then she says, oh, the class is very interesting. I might be interested in taking classes. I said, didn't we talk about this once before at Chuck Norris's school, about how far it is for you to come down? And she said, yeah, but I may have some time. Now, again, she may have said that knowing that Elvis wasn't going to be around for a couple of months, maybe. I don't know. So I said, okay, so I'm kind of like moving toward the door. Everybody's already outside and leaving. We're getting ready to lock up, and they put away the equipment and clean, sweep the floor. And she says, "Oh, where are you guys going?" I said, "Oh, we're just going to go next door for pizza. It's our pizza night." She goes, "Oh, can we join you?" I said, "Yeah, sure, absolutely." She said, "You sure it's all right?" I said, "Yeah, it's fine." So she joined us, and we all went there for pizza. And then slowly the instructors started to file out. And then I was left with her and one of my chief instructors, a guy named Howard Hansen, who was the president of the WKA, World Karate or World Kickboxing Association, later on. And so he stayed with me, and we were talking, and we just talked. It got later and later, and he says, "My God, you guys have to, it's a far drive back up. You guys have to leave." And she goes, "Oh, no, it's okay." So apparently she was not concerned about having to get home. And then so she did say, "Okay, it was nice watching the class, and is it okay if I call you if I decide to take classes?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So she eventually did. And then the first couple of times she came down, Nora drove her. I think the second or third time she came down, I was going home. It was not the Friday night pizza thing. I was going home, and she said, "Do you mind if I go home and meet your wife and children?" And I was just shocked. I said, "What?" She said, "Would it be okay if I meet your wife and your daughters?" I said, "No, it's okay. Do you really have time?" She said, "Yes." So I took her to the house and introduced her to Francine, my wife, and my two daughters, Shelley and Lori. And one thing led to another. She kept coming down all the time. And, I'm talking about 3 or 4 days a week. And she did very good. She was an excellent dancer. She really enjoyed dancing. And I think under Chuck, she was a green belt in Tang Sudo. Mm-hmm. But when she came to me, I said, "You'd have to start with a white belt. You can't wear a green belt here." And she goes, "But Chuck's your friend." I said, "Yeah, he still is my friend, but you are my student, not Chuck. So you have to wear a white belt like everybody else that starts here." And then the romantic thing happened just over time, I'm not going to tell you some things because it's going to be in my book for the first time.
Yes, I understand that. I mean, if we cover everything, then nobody will want to buy the book and read it. I'm sure you have lots and lots more stories to tell. I just wanted to say that Nora, the lady you referred to a couple of times, she was actually married to Lamar Fike, who was one of Elvis's entourage.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with
I'm almost pretty sure it was Lamar's wife. So one thing led to another, and as we know, Elvis and Priscilla separated.
Yes.
I really want to give you the opportunity, because down through the years, people have said Mike Stone was the bad apple in the barrel, and he split Elvis and Priscilla up. He was the reason why Priscilla left Elvis. So what's your answer to that?
Well, I have several answers. First of all, that's people that never knew probably Priscilla, myself, or Elvis personally. It's fans. It's people that love and respect Elvis, and they felt like they needed to protect him. So all of this I understand. I understand the nature of people. So that doesn't bother me. But what did bother me, again, at that time, it doesn't bother me anymore. What bothered me then was the media took a basic premise that I had stolen Elvis from Priscilla. And I was asked by a friend of mine to attend an event, I think it was in Vancouver, and I did. And when I went up there, he did not tell me that he had made an arrangement with the local TV station for me to plug his event the night before, because it was on the news, but it was a talk show thing a couple of days before, and that he had arranged with the producers of that talk show that I would go on to talk about Elvis and Priscilla, my relationship. And nobody ever told me that. So when I went there, I was in the green room, and the assistant producer or whoever she was that came in to say, "Okay, you're up next for the next segment." And so what she's going to ask you, she means the hostess, what she's going to ask you is it true that you stole Priscilla from Elvis? I said, what? She said, oh, I mean, it's agreed that she would ask you some of these questions. I said, well, who agreed to it? And she says, well, the guy that said that it's okay for us to interview you to promote the event. I said, well, I'm here to promote the event. And she said, well, we will do that. But, obviously we have a motive for giving you the time on the air to promote the event. And that is, we want for you to talk about your relationship with Priscilla. And I says, well, then you're not going to have it. I'm going to leave. So she was in a panic. And the next segment was about to start. So she ran out and called the hostess, and they made some arrangement where the hostess came back herself and talked to me in the green room and said, oh, Mr. Stone, I understand there's a miscommunication. I said, absolutely there is. Mm-hmm. And she said, but this is the understanding we have. I said, but nobody talked to me about it, and I don't have that understanding. So she said, but what's wrong with it? I said, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm offended by the question. I said, I didn't steal anybody. And she saw I was upset about it. And she said, well, would you like to tell the audience, both the in-studio audience and the people watching, your side of the story? And this is what I've been wanting to do ever since we met. And I've never gave an interview. So I said, yeah, if you just ask me that, will you give me 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever it is for me to explain my side? That's all I want to do. She says, absolutely, you have my word. So the next segment came on and we went on, and I have some photographs of this, and it's absolutely beautiful, the relationship that we had with the host. So she said, Mike, I already know what she was going to ask me. Mike, let's just cut to the chase. I have to ask you this question. Is it true that you stole Priscilla from Elvis? And when she said that, she told me what camera to look in. And she said, just go ahead and tell the people out there. So the light was on, but in the back of the camera, there was about 50 people in the studio audience at the time behind the camera. So I was both talking to the audience in the TV and the audience behind the camera. And I said, let me ask you all this simple question. How many of you during the course of your life has had a relationship that for whatever reason, not pointing fingers, not blaming, not condemning, not accusing, but for whatever reason, the relationship had run its course. It was over. How many of you have ever had a relationship like that? Now, I'm asking, obviously, the people on camera, and I don't know who's raising their hand, but the in-house studio, a lot of people raised their hand. And I said, it is impossible for anyone to steal another human being. First of all, it's called kidnapping, and why didn't anybody press charges against me for kidnapping Priscilla? I said, that's stupid, that's ludicrous. I said, somebody has to agree to go in advance. That means Priscilla had already decided she was going to leave Elvis. I happened to be the person she chose to use for her to get away from him, because she knew my strength and my reputation and Elvis's love for martial arts and Elvis's instructor, Ed Parker, and he was a very close friend of mine, and all of these associations. Out of all of the people, she later tells me that I could be the only one that she felt comfortable leaving Elvis.
Okay, you've answered that very well. I mean, I was going to say along the same lines as well. You know, the word steal means to take against permission, really, doesn't it? You have no permission to take that person or item or whatever it is. So, in a nutshell, Priscilla left of her own free will.
Yes, absolutely. And if you have ever looked at her articles and interviews with Barbara Walters in 1985 and a bunch of others, she has openly stated that she was in a situation. I mean, I think there was one time that she apparently said that there was no lovemaking for 7 years or something like that before they got married, apparently, and after the birth of Lisa. So imagine a beautiful woman, young, that has to live under conditions like that. And she always said that, I felt like I was a prisoner in that house. Everything I did was because of Elvis, for Elvis. Everything was him. There was nothing, she had no identity whatsoever. So if they went someplace, if they watched a movie, if they ate dinner, if they did everything, it was Elvis's choice and decision, which allowed everybody to conveniently follow and say, yes, well, if the Elvis wants that, that's what we're doing. So she lived like that. So can you imagine how difficult it would be for a young, beautiful woman to live under those conditions, regardless of who the man is, how famous, how wealthy?
It seems that she actually struggled with Elvis's lifestyle.
But anybody would.
Mm.
Anybody would. I tell you the truth, I struggled with her lifestyle when we lived together. It was the worst 4 years of my life. Not because of her. She was absolutely sensational. She was beautiful. She was caring. She was loving. She has a wonderful personality. She's very warm and outgoing. I found nothing wrong with her. The thing I couldn't take was the bullshit of Hollywood. I could not stand phony people. And it was not a good time for me whatsoever. No, again, like her, no matter who you're in a relationship with, how wealthy, how famous, how beautiful, how handsome, how rich, it makes no difference. When you're not happy within your soul, within the essence of who you are as a being, you're not happy. There's nothing externally outside of you that can fill that void.
I think you and I would get on very well because I don't suffer fools gladly either.
No, I mean, listen, life is way too short.
Yes.
You can't waste your time with people that tear you down, that are negative, that are disruptive, that are jealous, envy, hatred, greed, selfishness, fear. Please stop it already. So no matter who they are, if you have to change your life, if you have to find new relationships, it takes a lot of courage to do that. I give her credit for the courage it took for her to live or leave that lifestyle, that comfort, that fame, that recognition, not for her, but for her husband, to leave that. It took some serious thinking. Yes. Especially when she was at an age of 14 where she was highly impressionable, obviously, even for her parents to allow her to move into Graceland. Please give me a break.
I wanted to ask, during your time with Priscilla, were you ever concerned for your own personal safety?
If I say never, would you believe me?
Well, you're a handy fella when it comes to self-defense and so forth, so I would probably believe that you weren't too concerned.
No, I was never concerned.
Because, as you know, there were accusations in certain books that were written just prior to Elvis passing away that accused him of making certain threats.
Yes, I'm very aware of all of that. But I am aware of all the people that were aware of it at the time. I've talked with several of them, including Dave Hebler. I was never concerned. In fact, I believe someone, when they had written their book called Elvis, What Happened?
Yes.
I think in chapter 4 or something, they had mentioned that Elvis must have been crazy if he thought he could ever fight Mike, to fight me man to man.
Did Priscilla ever say anything about these threats to you?
Yes, of course. We talked about it openly. So
you just, it was something which you just thought, I shouldn't be concerned about this. And there was no more to say.
No, actually, there was one time we were living in Marina del Rey, and this was before we had moved up to the house on Somerset in Beverly Hills. And Elvis had called and had wanted to talk with Lisa Marie. Lisa Marie had already gone to sleep. This was about 10 o'clock at night. So Elvis was apparently, I don't know if I should say this, but he wasn't in his own right mind. He may have been on some medication, I'll put it that way.
That's fair enough, okay.
While talking to Priscilla. And while talking to Priscilla, he knew obviously that I was there, that we were living together. So he made the threat again to Priscilla about what he was going to do to me, that he said he would make me get on my knees and beg for my life in front of her. And so I did not hear this part, but I was watching Priscilla's face, and it started to change until she started crying. So I said, Priscilla, what's up? And she says, nothing, it's okay. I said, no, you're still talking to Elvis. And she said, she just nodded her head, yes. So I said, what did he say? She said, nothing, it's okay. I said, what did he say? And she said, oh, he's just angry and upset and he'll get over it. But what did he say? And he said that he'll come over here because he knows where we live, and that he will beat me up and put me on my knees and make me beg for my life. So she was holding the mouthpiece at the time, and I grabbed her hand and moved her hand from the mouthpiece, and I said, Elvis, I will never run away from you, ever.
Was he still trying to get Priscilla back? Did he want Priscilla back? Because I believe that Elvis moved on. He accepted that Priscilla wanted a divorce, but there are people who said that he always loved Priscilla and he was asking for her to come back right to the very day he died.
Well, I really don't know that. You would have to ask Priscilla. If Priscilla knew that situation, she was nice enough not to say it to me. Not that I knew Elvis, because I only met him probably on 4 occasions, but I knew him very well because of Priscilla, because of all the stories she said. But even if she did not, if a man is this good looking, this wealthy, this sought out after by everyone, if he has the world at his fingertips, and the thing that he prized most was to give the impression that he loved his wife no matter what. And I'm not saying he did not. Even, men are basically, I'm not talking about Elvis, I'm talking about me right now when I say this. Men are basically dogs.
Okay.
They are basically animals. This is the nature of the male. So when I say that, I'm talking about that in relationship to attracting and being with women. So he knew how popular and famous he was. So for him to go quietly into the sunset when his wife is going to leave him, not he leave her. He has left every other woman in his life, but she left him. What do you think it did to his ego? What do you think it did to his pride? What do you think it did to his reputation? What do you think and in the state that Elvis was at the time, I'm talking about partaking in a lot of medication. I mean, who if you are around him to know that he shoots television sets, he has guns everywhere, under the cushions, under pillows, in the bathroom, everywhere in the suite at the International Hotel. And when I walked in, he was giving me a tour of the suite, showing me where all the weapons were. So how secure is a man that he has to show another man, look, I have a gun here, one here, 3 in the bedroom, 1 over here, 1 in the bathroom, in the living room, in the plaza, in the kitchen. So do you understand what I'm saying, Steve?
Yeah, I've got a better understanding now. I think you've actually addressed the points I was trying to get at, why he said those things to Priscilla, why he acted the way he did prior to the divorce and so forth.
Yes, I understand, and I understand it. I mean, I never thought he did anything wrong. He was simply being a man, and the man that he was, this is the way he chose to express himself and how he wanted to vent his anger and frustration, disappointment, jealousy, whatever it was. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist. I have a hard time dealing with my own thoughts.
Your relationship with Priscilla sort of run its course. As you have mentioned previously, that's what relationships sometimes do.
Yes.
And was it I think you said 4 years.
Yes, because from the time that she started, we hardly started to have a relation from the time that she came down to take karate lessons with me.
Oh yes.
So this was over 1.5 years before anybody in Hollywood knew where she was going on weekends. We actually had an apartment in Naples, in Long Beach, long before anybody knew. The only people that knew that never said a word were my students and my karate instructors. That's how long we were already dating before anybody had any suspicion.
Okay, so and all this is going to be covered in the upcoming book that you're working on.
Yes.
And I think you've outlined that you're going to kind of break it down into 3, maybe 4 sections. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the first section is going to, well, you can tell me actually, what is the first section going to cover?
The first section deals with my childhood. I kind of broke everything down into 10-year segments. But it's sad that people like Priscilla and like Michelle that are gifted, that are truly beautiful people inside, that they are so easily misunderstood and misrepresented because of their beauty and their position in life, and not taken at face value. I think this was one of the major reasons that Priscilla wanted to leave. She wanted her own identity. She wanted to see if she could make it on her own, succeed or fail, that she would be responsible for the outcome of her life. So, and Michelle, my goodness, what a gifted actress, unbelievable. So yes, I'll talk about, and listen, I'm not doing it to be nice or trying to be nice or afraid what anybody, there is nothing I could ever say bad about the people I had relationships with except Phil Spector, and I will tell the truth about that.
And probably no title yet either. If you, that's probably the last thing on your mind.
The title?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an idea for it. I was thinking of Nothing But the Truth.
Oh yeah, that's snappy and to the point. Anyway, Nothing But the Truth. Yeah, that would work.
Well, I don't know whether it will or not, but that's one. That's one of the ones I am leaning toward.
Mike, I've had such a great time talking to you over the last hour and a half. I've really enjoyed it, I must admit. And I'm glad that you agreed to the interview, and, it would give you the opportunity just to set the record straight.
Yes, I appreciate it, Steve. Thank you so much.